instructor and then actually doing the work and earning a certificate as they go. So definitely very proud of that. If you have a need or know someone that does, be more than happy to connect you with someone in the office who can do the income qualification paperwork. I also have just sort of a list, and I'll leave a stack of these, a list that has the income qualifying guidelines. So if there's any questions about would I qualify, would I not qualify, have a stack of these that I'll leave. And I'll also leave information on how to get a hold of us. So just 3570 or ahoworks@isdanet.org. The other thing I want to say, and this is a new piece, so this program has been around for a little bit through something called Community Services Block Grant, which is a really, really tiny amount of money every year, which is why we get to so few homes. But we sort of spun that off into a community development block grant this year in particular, working through Josue's department to do that. So we're actually going to be able to reach more homes and do more significant work this year. But the other thing that we managed to do was get, again, a small amount of money to do some neighborhood cleanup stuff. So you may say, yeah, well, I don't qualify, or this person's not around and it's a vacant property and there's garbage everywhere, and it's really dragging our neighborhood down. So I don't know if you've seen some of that work that we've been doing over the last couple months, but the Americorp and CCC crew that we had in really acted as a force multiplier for us. We were able to clean up 10 properties, some of them in direct connection and collaboration with the homeowner. Some of them that were, there was actually one that was a county property. We sort of figured out who owned it by the end of it. And we went in there and pulled all this garbage out that had been illegally dumped, sort of a Wildcat dump that had come up. And we were able to clean some of that up. And so again, that's pretty dependent on volunteer labor, but as we can organize them, we're happy to just get out there and start cleaning up neighborhoods. So if you've got some houses in mind or a neighbor in mind who you think may need a little bit of assistance cleaning up, because what we found is some of the yards that we cleaned up were people that had physical limitations or financial limitations, who just couldn't afford or couldn't get to the dump and couldn't get their garbage out. And so we were able to come in and just sort of help them get on top of things. And hopefully, we know a handful of them are going to come right back, but hopefully not all of them do, is the goal. So again, if there are properties around and you look at them and you think, wow, that's a real eyesore, I wish somebody would tackle that, give us a ring, we'll get it on the list. We'll reach out to the homeowner, the property owner, and say, do you need a hand? We'll come help you out. And as long as they're willing, we're willing to find the work to do it. So again, I'll leave this information. If anybody's interested, more than happy to chat with you. I'll be around after the meeting as well. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Beekeeper and bee remover necessary. And I'd like to ask you to listen very carefully to what John has to say. He has a lifetime of experience and a very special insight on living with bees without fear and understanding what many terms that we may think are fearful about bees really mean, and how wonderful it is to have bees in our lives.
I'm going to turn this around. I have a picture on there that you can come and look at later. I'm not going to go into it very deep. But it's the Society in a Box. And, you've...
Turn this head back a little more, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've all heard of the gentleman farmer. I'm the gentleman beekeeper. I don't have a whole lot of bees, but I do like working with them. And bees are the most humble, hardworking of the unsung heroes of the food chain. They essentially have to be used to pollinate 90% of the food that we eat. Almonds, apples, blueberries, all of your garden variety of vegetables. So we have to protect them as long as we can. Now, let's look at this. This is the hive, and there are 3 different bees in that hive. The queen, the female workers, and the drones. The drones are the only males in the hive, and they don't do anything but lay around and eat honey until it's time to breed with the queen. And so in the fall of the year, the worker bees will kick them out so that they won't be eating up everything that they need for the winter. Now, all of the other 2, the worker and the queen, are all female, so you know who runs that job. Now, as soon as the worker bee emerges from the cell, the first thing she does is to start cleaning the cells so that the queen can start laying eggs in that cell. And from there, then she starts taking care of the baby bees and making the wax comb. After that, she starts foraging for nectar, and so she's pretty busy. Every one of these ladies have a job to do, and they each get to change jobs, so it's not boring for them. Now, the queen, once the spring starts and they start making the wax comb for her, she can lay between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs a day. And that's why that we have probably up to 50,000 bees in one colony. And now let's talk about the swarm, bee swarms. A swarm is caused by too many bees in the hive. And when this happens, the worker bees will provide a new queen. And when she hatches, the old queen will take half of that hive and they'll leave. Now, they can end up in some of the darndest places. I've seen them on tree limbs, in bushes, on shopping carts, and in irrigation controls. And most of the time, they cannot sting while they are swarming, because before they leave the hive, they gorge themselves on honey. And they need to do this so that when they establish the new hive, they'll have something to keep them going until they can start foraging outside. And the reason they can't sting is because they are so full of honey, they can't turn their abdomen down to get the stinger. Now, at this time, the queen will send out scouts, and they'll scout around the area, and they're looking for some place where they can build a new hive. And they will find the smallest hole that they can find, and that's where they'll go. If it's in a house, abandoned house, that's where they'll go. Now, if you have any place in your house that they can get into the attic, the best thing for you to do is to call a beekeeper and let them come and look at what the situation is and see if they can save that hive. It's not always possible. Sometimes it just can't be done. As Mr. Freeman knows, they had a big swarm of bees in that building out there across from NAPA, and I tried to get them, but it was just impossible. There were just too many of them, and so they had to exterminate them. If they get into the attic of your house, you need to either get the beekeeper to remove them or get them exterminated, and that's the last resort, because once they start bringing honey in, it's not going to be long before the heat down here, the honey starts running down the walls, and that attracts ants and native bees, and so we got to get them before they really start putting the honey into that attic. After World War II, there were approximately 5 million colonies of bees in the United States. Last year, they were 2.5 million colonies. So we have lost a lot of bees in the last few years. Now in the 50s and 60s, bees started to lose out, and these days estimated that the 2.5 million were all that was left. Bees face problems today. Pesticides used in agriculture, plus the wax moth and a small beetle, and stress. In California, they moved the hives around the state to take care of apples, cherries, and mainly almonds. And when you have to move these beehives, that puts a stress on them. And if it was possible not to do that, it would be better, but they even bring bees from Idaho and Montana down here to California and the South to help pollinate the almonds. They charge $165 per hive to place them in an almond field. This will increase the cost of that farmer producing that product. A couple of years ago, they had a bad year, and almond prices went to $5.70 a pound. Nobody would buy those almonds, they're too expensive. And so a lot of them went to waste. So we have to make sure that we save as many of these bees as we can, because it's not going to be long before the native bees will be gone, and so will the honeybees. In 2005, they came up with a new pesticide. Now, I hope I can pronounce this right. It's called neonicotinoids. Now, some scientist probably made that, and he put that name on it so nobody could pronounce it or know what it was. What it is it's a nicotine from tobacco, and they coat the seeds, and then when they plant them, that pesticide goes right into the veins of the plant and right up to the flower. And so when the bees come to get that nectar and pollen, it kills them. In Europe, they have outlawed that particular thing. Here in the States, they have been using it on corn and soybeans for a couple, 3 years now. And they have done a test on the soybeans, and they have found out that it does no good at all to put this on the soybean seeds. They will still produce as many soybeans as they would without a lot of people think that these honeybees are killing the native bees. No, they're probably helping because they are taking some of the nectar and pollen. But the main thing that's killing all of our pollinators today is pesticides. And any time you use a pesticide, it stays long enough that one of the pollinators are going to get into it. Now, the gardens that we have here in town, I'm sure that our bees love them because they're not using any pesticides as far as I know. I found out today that honeybees cannot pollinate tomato plants. And navel oranges don't need to be pollinated. And the reason they can't pollinate the tomatoes is because they can't get up into the flower to get the pollen. So we depend on the bumblebee. He comes up and he shakes that flower until the pollen starts falling out. And then as it comes out, it takes care of fertilizing the flower and you can produce a tomato, and he can get some of the pollen and take back to his nest. So we have to really watch what we're using nowadays as far as pesticides. And my nephew works for a chemical company in Idaho. He delivers Roundup and pesticides to the farmers. And I talked to him, I said, what is the most expensive pesticide that you sell? He said, 1 gallon costs $4,500. When they have to use that kind of pesticides, that brings the cost of their operation up. And in turn, that's going to bring the cost of potatoes up. So we've got to watch that really close. And this, I'm not going to say that whole word again, nicotinoid, they have tested it in labs with rats, and it affects the brain. And it makes them lose memory. And so, what was I talking about? If you continue to eat the produce that comes off of the farm that is using this pesticide, it's going to affect your brain. The only way that we can completely save all of our honeybees and native bees is to eat organic. If everybody in the U.S. would eat organic, it would put the chemical companies out of business. And that's probably what it's going to take, because they've been trying to get rid of some of this pesticides for years, and the government won't take care of getting rid of it. So if we continue the way we are, we're going to be like China. China, in some areas, have no bees at all, not even native bees. They hand pollinate apples and pears. So we better watch out, or we'll be out there with a little brush pollinating some of our vegetables and stuff. Now, I'm going to open it up for questions, but first of all, I've got a couple of questions for you. Does anybody know how long a honeybee lives during the honey season?
6 weeks.
That's right. I didn't think anybody would know that. Okay, the next one. How much honey does a honeybee produce in its lifetime? Any guesses? 1/12 of a teaspoon. Yeah. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, does the honey in this area, if I eat it, does it take care of my allergies? It hasn't been proven, but there's a lot of people out there that swear by it. I read an article, this one lady had a 6-year-old, I think it was, that during the summer really had a bad time. She started using the honey from that area. Not the processed honey. It has to be the honey that's not gone through the processing to be sterilized. And you need to use the honey and the comb because it's got everything in there that you need to take care of the allergies, and also it's good and healthy for you. 1 teaspoon a day is all you need. Sometimes it'll take 3 or 4 years, but it will take care of allergies. Now, any questions?
What about pollen for allergies?
Pollen?
I know up in Snowflake they used to sell pollen for allergies.
Yeah, I don't know much about that because,
My husband tried it.
you know, they advertise royal jelly too. How are they going to go in there and get that royal jelly away from that queen? I don't know how it's done, but, you know, anything can be done, I guess.
Could you explain how you define Africanized and what that word really means?
Everybody's afraid of that word, Africanized bees. Back in, I think it was 1987, down in Brazil, this guy decided that, hey, if the government will let me, I'll go to Africa and get some bees. We can make bees that are faster and make more honey and help our economy. Well, about 20 queens got away. And that's why we have Africanized bees. And we're not going to get rid of them. We're going to have to live with them. But if you leave them alone, they won't bother you. If a bee, any kind of a bee, is on its way to find pollen or nectar, it won't even bother you. I work with these Africanized bees around here all the time. And yeah, I get stung, but doesn't hurt for very long. And if you get stung, instead of squeezing that little bag with the stinger, scrape it. Because when you squeeze it, you squeeze all that poison right into your arm. So take your fingernail and scrape it, or your knife and scrape it, and then put an ice cube on it. That will take care of getting the swelling down and make it feel better. But if we're going to have these Africanized bees around, there's no way we're going to get rid of them. They are affected by the pesticides too, so, but I don't know of very many cases where those Africanized bees has bothered anybody.
I've had them on my property for 10 years, and what I do is I set water out in the summer for them. I just walk right up to them.
Yeah, haven't you got a couple of swarms out there in there?
So much honey is dripping out of that. Can I put a pan on that?
Yeah, yeah.
John, I think the point you made is really important, that it's a swarm, it's not even a hive, it's a swarm, which is what we're gonna see, you'll see a lot. You might see in the trees, you might see, you know, they're not gonna sting you, they can't sting you, and that's where a lot of people get a fear, because they see this in
Right.
movies. I've seen them hang in the bushes.
And
It's near the hive,
Yeah.
is where you're gonna get your most potential to get stung. skunk.
Yeah.
So if you see bees going in and out of something, obviously you don't want to approach them. If it's
Yeah.
at your house, that's where John will then give you suggestions on what to do.
Yeah.
But a swarm that's out in the open, not in a building, because African hives and honeybees are cavity nesters. They go into nest inside something. If it's out in the open, it's a swarm moving to a new location. And they cannot sting you. There's no reason to be afraid, you just simply have to walk away.
And lots of times you'll see a swarm of bees hanging in a tree. Don't worry about them.
Just walk away.
I've had them so high in a tree I couldn't get them, and in 3 days they're gone. They have found a place to go.
They're just looking to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And the night they had the gallery opening down here on the plaza, a lady came to me and said, "I understand you work with bees." And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Come here, I want to show you something." We walked out in front of the Chamber of Commerce, and about this high off the ground in a bush, there was a swarm of bees about that big. I said, "Oh, okay, I'll get them in the morning."